about to begin. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. It's gonna be bloody fun. We're gonna kill everyone. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show. With lots of blood and lots of guts. Two horror fanatics and rock and roll nuts. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show.
Fools and Fiends, here we are again. We have oh so fun things to discuss. We have things that will make you squeal, things that will make you scream, things that might make you sink, and some things that might slay you. It is another Vampire and Devil Showdown. We are going to howl at the moon, bark at the moon, because we are going to talk werewolves today, my friend.
Oh yeah, it's time to pull out those gnarly teeth and start howling at the moon. And we're not talking about Teen Wolf here.
Oh, we weren't? I thought that was part of this showdown. Shit, man.
Yeah.
Weren't we doing Teen Wolf and Teen Wolf 2?
Yeah, unfortunately, I love those movies, but there's no blood, so we can't really talk about that as a horror movie.
Oh, darn. Sorry, Michael. We'll have to get back to you. Although, fun fact about Teen Wolf and Teen Wolf 2 for anybody who is into that creepier side that might be unfamiliar, the actor that played Chubby was John Wayne Gacy in a very, very good John Wayne Gacy movie.
Yep.
All right. We are, though, going to talk about werewolves. And we are putting Cursed up against Ginger Snaps. So we're going to have a little bit of fun right now. Why don't we kick it off with Cursed? So Cursed is an interesting one. There's a lot to unpackage in this movie, brother. And it's not all going to be fun either. This movie, it's near and dear to me. It's the reason I picked it. I like this movie. I like the concept of this movie. And despite the many flaws of which we will get into, the premise of the movie I thought was solid. The execution is very flawed. But that's for the end of the review. So the cast is solid. I mean, it's got my beloved Wednesday Addams. It's got Christina Ricci. It's kind of got that setup of like the hot, new kind of up-and-coming actors and actresses. It's got Joshua Jackson. It's got Shannon Elizabeth for a split second. I mean, it's got a pretty quality cast in it. But I like the opening concept, the opening premise of the movie where you've got, Christina Ricci's character and her brother are driving. They get into this gnarly car wreck that is with Shannon Elizabeth as the driver of the other car. And while they're trying to save her, this werewolf just literally shows up out of nowhere and just unalives her in pieces.
Yeah. I remember, I remember this movie came out, and I remember it being decent. Like I said, I liked the cast, I liked the the actors and the actresses and that. And then rewatching it again, which we'll talk about later on too, I didn't realize how bad this movie really honestly is. I don't remember it being that bad the first time that I saw it, but watching it now years later with such good werewolf movies and such good movies that these people have all been in, it's like, yeah, this one isn't that great. But like you said, I mean, it's got a good cast. I love the, like you said, it's a lot of young actors. I mean, Christina Ricci's kind of a seasoned actor since she was started acting so young. But you got like you said, Shannon Elizabeth's in it. Yeah, her brother was Jesse Eisenberg, who now is like Zombie Land and all that stuff like that. So he's kind of blown up, but at this time he was still kind of a unknown actor.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely with you on that. And don't get me wrong, man. When you and I were talking werewolves and picking our movies, Cursed hit me like immediately, kind of for that same reason. I remember, you know, being super stoked about the movie coming out, but of course I go see anything with Christina Ricci in it anyway. But I was just excited in general for the movie. I was like, oh, cool, the new hot werewolf movie, and Wes Craven's directing it. Bitchin', like that is the way. Let me sink my teeth into that shit. Um, but yeah, watching it now as a few more 100 year seasoned vampire, it definitely a little drop of blood came out of my eye while watching this movie because it's definitely a little bit sad on my black heart when it comes to, like, again, other werewolf stuff that is become a little bit more established, better effects and stuff like that, like the underworlds of the and even stuff like the Resident Evil. But anyway, the overall premise, like I said, I like the idea of it. You know, the wounds that Jesse and Christina sustain are the ones that eventually start morphing them into werewolves. But it is a lot of the CGI effects that they use in this, which actually aids this movie to fall flat a bit. And the funny thing is, this is 20 years after what a movie that might have the greatest werewolf transformation scene just in cinema, in American Werewolf in London. This is 20 years later where everything should be better, and the CGI was just, oh man, it hurts you, bro.
No, yeah, I mean, I always say that in comparison whenever you talk about werewolf movies. You go with the American Werewolf in London, like you said,
Just
the special effects and the effects and the the all the just the gags and the all the craziness, like, so cool, and such a transformation is so awesome. It's down there in history as one of the greatest transformations, especially werewolf transformations ever. And then you got to, like you said, 20 some years later, you got American Werewolf in Paris. And
yeah,
it's like, what the shit happened? I understand CGI is way easier to do, but it's like, how do you go from usually it's supposed to be, years later, you're supposed to be better than your predecessors.
I know.
It's supposed to be better. I mean, if you look at, like we've talked about in on this stuff on this show many a times, we talked about like Tom Savini and those, and K and B and all those makeup effects. You look at the makeup effects of this what they grew up with in the 50s and the 60s and those kind of stuff. How cheesy that kind of makeup was, and how they revolutionized the makeup genre and all that kind of stuff. So if you look at the movies in the early 60s and the 70s and horror, how it was kind of and then the 80s and the early 90s it started getting gnarly and gnarly. You would think that by now it would be even crazier, but now the world is so much into the digital age that those kind of special effects are a dime a dozen now.
And it is kind of funny that you brought up American Werewolf in Paris because we were almost talking about that movie for this showdown. Because that's another movie that I hold in a small happy place. But again, I was kind of stoked then. And then I revisited it not that long ago. Even before we were discussing werewolves, it was just a movie I popped in one day and I was kind of like, oh dear. But it is crazy when you talk about those special effects. So, like, just in comparing bite scenes, I want to compare bite scenes of two very opposite ends of the spectrum movies, in Blackula and Cursed, where you've got a bite scene in Blackula where the vampire takes a giant chunk out of his victim's neck, and you can see the latex and stuff like that giving way for the bite. But it's solid, it's quality, and then it's like a dream sequence of a scene that I wanted to love, in Christina Ricci taking this absolute monster bite out of Joshua Jackson's neck, to just this insanely weird CGI, like Sharpie style spray of just blood coming out of Joshua's neck. And I'm just like, oh dear God.
Yeah. This whole entire movie was just like was that. I mean, it was just very odd timing, very odd like you said, the CGI and stuff like that, very odd, like things that they were doing, in most werewolf movies, the transformation is only during the full moon, and that's it. It's usually they go into, you transform into a human, into the wolf, and then once the moon is cycle is over, you go back to human. Where in this movie, they could just turn into a werewolf anytime they wanted to. And it was like, well, that makes absolutely no sense because the whole premise of it, even in this movie or any werewolf movie, and since the title of this movie is called Cursed, it's that lore of being a werewolf is a curse. It's a
Yeah.
curse that you're going out and you're killing and maiming and needing to eat every time the moon comes out. Most werewolf movies, where people don't like being a werewolf. It's like it is a curse. Where in this movie, it's like, okay, you have this curse, but yet I can go in and out of it. I'm like, well, shit, if I can go in and out of it anytime I want to and have the werewolf strength and shit like that, shit, I would just be a werewolf all the damn time.
That almost kind of is closer to the premise of Teen Wolf, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah,
Like once you get a hold of your skills, you can use it to have great power to be able to
yeah,
take care of things. But let's focus on the word cursed, because this movie was cursed.
yeah,
Like this was a weird. This had a weird 4-year development from like the announcement to the release. It's very strange and very tough. I mean, it's half the cast that it originally was because the other cast was like practically all replaced due to rewrites, changes in special effects, changing in writers, thus all the delays in production, thus leading to scheduling conflicts. I mean, this was supposed to be like Skeet Ulrich's return to working again with Wes Craven, like right after Scream, and even Heather Langenkamp was supposed to be in this movie, and that would have been a cool Wes Craven throwback to Nightmare, and we didn't get any of that.
yeah. Apparently, yeah, they changed like the effects company like 3 times throughout this entire movie, and like scenes that were like done, they had to go back and redo. They had shots that were done with actors that couldn't do it anymore and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, it was such a weird. Like I said, it was such a weird when you found out like the history, and you looked at the history of this movie, and you're like, well, that kind of makes sense of why this movie was maybe as bad as it really was, and it really, in general, probably wouldn't have been as bad of a movie. Hence, if the original concept and the original things and the original actors and all that stuff was there, then maybe this movie wouldn't have been nearly as bad. But because of all that, different people coming in and out and this and that, it made the movie seem like just very amateurish,
Yeah.
especially for somebody who is like, it's not Wes's fault,
No.
of that, what I mean, he's just the director. I mean, all he can do is just kind of, point the camera where he needs to go to and stuff like that. But his team behind him is always revolving around stuff, and then he's, fighting with, production. He's fighting with the producers of the movie and the big heads and all that kind of stuff like that. Then it's like, hey man, you do it this way or you're not. We'll find another director that will do whatever we want to do.
Right, because Wes is directing only what he sees in front of him. So, like, he's directing Christina to take a bite out of Joshua Jackson's neck and have Joshua react to having a bite taken out of his neck. Somebody else is then later going to add in the Sharpie spray. I mean,
Yeah.
it's. And even losing Rick Baker, which don't get me wrong, like you lose Rick Baker on your project, that's just a kick to the nuts because you
Right,
know
yeah.
that what that guy's going to do is great. But even having KNB, I can't really knock them around all that much. But then when you lose them, who's another practical effects thing, to then go straight CGI, it just changes everything. It just changes the format and all that
Oh
kind of
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
Especially for that, especially for that, and like you said, dude, you have Rick Baker, who is a legendary makeup artist and stuff like that, special effects guy. You got K&B, which is basically Greg Nicotero and all those guys'
yep.
stuff. So those another, your main guy was a legend. You lose him, you get those guys, then all of a sudden you lose them. Fuck, I would have done CGI too, because I was like, shit, we got nobody else that's, not saying there's not other better special, other special effects,
Right.
teams and makeup artists that could have done a good job too. But, you know, who would have known if you would have brought in that another great, one all of a sudden, who knows whether or not something bad was going to happen with that. So they were just like, yeah, fuck it. By this time, was like, let's just do some shitty fake spray bullshit CGI shit. And I mean, like I said, even in the very beginning when Shane and Elizabeth gets ripped up and like that, it was such a cool scene, and it just like
Yeah.
kind of it looked cool. So I was like, oh yeah, maybe the premise of this movie will be cool with the CGI, because sometimes CGI is good. And you got some scenes in this movie where the CGI was awesome, and then you had other times where the CGI was just like, what were they doing?
No, for sure. And it is also kind of funny though that they had Greg Nicotero's team for like a split second, because he ended up reuniting with Christina Ricci down the line for The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
So I just think that's really funny. But yeah, it was just an interesting mash and stuff like that. Like I've heard a lot of back and forth about the CGI transformation of human to werewolf and stuff like that. And while I don't think it was the worst we'd ever seen, the CGI of it is very bizarre. It it's a little stiff. It also has a lot to do with the fact that it's weird too, because of the speed in which it can happen, where it's like, again, you put it up against a predecessor like American Werewolf in London, where you see the transformation, you feel the guy's pain as he's morphing, shaping, his skull is expanding, his like bones are kind of like extending, almost breaking to go in like a different direction to form the actual joints of a wolf. Like, versus this, which is a little bit more on that, like, I forget exactly the term that was used, but just more, it's less of a werewolf for me and just more of some of those like mythological demon type creatures, almost kind of like the character that was like the Hyde that they used in the Wednesday show. I felt a little bit more like that, where it was a little bit more like less of a werewolf, a little bit more of a demon-ish character, considering that the werewolves for this movie, for me, they were more human than human.
Yeah. And then, like you were saying, like we were saying before, then they take that kind of different step in this movie where it is that little bit of that Teen Wolf, like you were saying, in Teen Wolf, where he can move in and out. They even take a step of that where Jesse's character, her brother, is getting bullied by this guy the whole entire time. And then he's happened to be at the wrestling match, and they're like, hey, wrestle this guy. And he, like, all of a sudden just jumps down, like Marvel style from the blade, and then finally starts wrestling and starts picking up these guys, and like Jesse's character probably weighs like 95 pounds soaking wet, and he's over picking up these like big dudes and just like throwing them around and stuff like that. So it's like it was kind of like, it kind of reminded me of a little bit of like that Teen Wolf, where like, yeah, he's going to use the wolf to excel in sports, maybe even, then they never really, it was only really for that one scene, and then all of a sudden you never really got any more into it. It was like, I was like, man, I was like waiting for him to like either join the basketball team or maybe do some boxing like in Teen Wolf 2.
Right. No, for sure. But I mean, but still, on a lighter note, there are just cool, fun things though about the movie, and also kind of cool, fun things about casting. I mean, we've met Derek Mears; he's a sweetheart. We love him, and he played the werewolf, in full giant Derek Mears's glory. So there's fun things like that, but unfortunately, it's just kind of one of those movies that I think had, as the old saying goes, just too many cooks or too many chefs, or too many chiefs, not enough Indians, kind of a thing, however the phrase goes. But yeah, basically too many hands in the cookie jar, just too many people with opinions, too many people saying this, changing that. And I think overall it hurts the product. Like I said at the beginning of the conversation, Bud, like I like the premise. I like the script. I like the idea the movie is based on. I actually think for a new take of a werewolf movie, it's really not bad. I actually think it's a very good concept. But just way too many people, like, adding too much cinnamon here, not enough salt there. It's just, and it hurts the overall product, unfortunately. And despite the fact that the late great Wes Craven is still, of course, very, very high up in our books, it's a small little besmirchment on a very good career for him
No, yeah, and then
that he
throughout
can't
this
be
whole.
faulted for either.
Yeah, exactly, and you can't blame him. I mean, just like anything, we're gonna talk about these directors when we start doing these series of directors and stuff like that, and not even though we love Wes Craven, and like I said, we'll never talk ill about To the Dead, because there's no way for them to defend themselves. But even great directors and great actors and great musicians have shitty things sometimes. Sometimes
Yeah,
their project or what they're doing isn't as good as some of the other stuff. And, well, like I said, when we get into these series, we'll talk about the good and the bad. And it's like one of these ones where, like I said before, I don't remember this movie being as bad of a
yeah,
movie, but now I would put this on a lower end of Wes Craven's movies that he's done. It's definitely on that tier of the lower end of his career stuff. But like I said, no fault to him.
yeah.
It's like I said, but it's like I said, it was a cool concept. I liked the concept. I liked the actors. I liked the storyline in general. It's a cool, this kind of like coming of age, stuff like that. It has a lot of like that teenage angst in it. It's got a lot of the character coming out. That's the bully guy that you find out that's gay and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So it's a lot of that coming of age kind of stuff, which is kind of like what, like, we've talked about Teen Wolf a bunch of times, but it's kind of, this movie is a very more kind of a horror version of sort of Teen Wolf a little bit. It's got a lot of that little aspects that are in Teen Wolf. But yeah, I mean, until you get to the end, and then the end is kind of
I can't.
the
I
end
don't.
is the end.
The end is the end, and we'll speak briefly on it. I'll voice my opinion. Of course, I'll let you reply, and then we'll get right into the obituaries and the on the kill count, because the movie's gonna get killed. But I don't understand the end. I really don't. This idea of Joshua Jackson's character laying out his grand plan of wanting to have all of us as this giant werewolf family. But it's like, oh yeah, but Christina, by the way, I'm gonna murder your brother, and I just kind of expect you to be cool with it, right? Cool,
Yeah.
cool, high five. And then it goes to credits, and I'm kind of like, what? Huh? Like,
Yeah.
wait, run that shit by me again? So it was so incomplete feeling. Like,
Yeah.
almost like it was like the Sopranos just going to black, but without the, but where that was just simply designed to raise anger, this just did nothing but give me confusion.
Yeah, yeah, and it kind of did, and the ending to me was kind of confusing too, with the crossing I guess the lore of werewolves slash vampires, where a lot of times in some lores of vampires, if you kill a master, anybody that he's turned will can can come back to being a normal person again. Where they kind of did this in there's a werewolf one, where if you kill the werewolf person, then you kind of, I was like, wait, when was that ever in the werewolf lore? I've never read about you being able to do it that way. Like I said, I mean, not too many vampire lores have that, but there has been some that have
Yeah,
used that as a an idea and stuff like that. But I've never heard it ever being used for anything that had to do with werewolves, lycanthropes, or any of that kind of stuff, where it was like you kill the one and all of a sudden now you're not a werewolf anymore, and it's like, wait, I don't know. But yeah, the whole ending of this movie was, and then you're like, you find out the girl was the woman was behind it all the time, half the time, and and you're like, you don't know which, the one werewolf didn't know the other werewolf was doing something, and he was doing something, but the main characters knew what happened, so it was kind of confusing. Like, well, which werewolf did this and which werewolf did that? Which was it? The werewolf, was it Joss's character that killed Shannon, or was it the other guy? Like, by the time you got to this movie, you're like, I don't know who the fuck killed who.
No, for sure. And that's the thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I loved the casting of that character because she played a quality, top-notch bitch.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
so I loved that casting, and I liked her acting as that character. But yeah, it's all over the place. And the funny thing is, and I like the fact that you brought it up, Devil, is imagine if this movie was done, this way, as in this script, this style, with this kind of storytelling, but without the flaws, the flubs, the proper casting, and all the rewrites. But if everything was still just kept solid in this story arc, there could be a possibility of a very interesting, almost Marvel Universe thing that could have allowed Cursed to be the prequel into what became Underworld.
yeah, or
Even if
even
it
like,
wasn't dead on and a specific story that went right to that, because you would still have to figure out, how to bring in Scott Speedman's character and stuff like that, which again wouldn't be overly difficult, but you would still have to find a way. But if it
yeah,
was done more just properly, without all the rubbish, and just on the proper story arc, it could have just been its own kind of cool little cult predecessor to Underworld. And I think that that would have been potentially kind of cool.
yeah. I mean, and like I said, and when you're most people who are writing movies, and I'm not quite sure who wrote the movie, so I can't think of it off the top of my head. But most people who usually write a movie, write this, you never expect there to be part twos, part threes, part fours of series. Like sometimes you do write for them just in case. Where
Yeah.
this movie, you can put Cursed on there too. It's like, yeah, they definitely shot themselves in the ass by like them ever having another sequel to
Yeah.
this movie for multiple reasons of why this movie should not have a sequel. Because you would just, I mean, the plot holes in this movie was bad enough. There'd be way too many plot holes to continue on the series. So you basically shot yourself in the foot by, continuing, which is, like I said, I'm pretty sure, like, if I'm a writer and I find out that Wes Craven is making my movie, right? And I wrote this script and the storyboard and did all this stuff like that. Find out, Wes Craven is making my movie. This guy is the king of, continual movies.
Yeah.
I mean, how many series has he's done that have had multiple ones? I would be like, even if I didn't write it, I would have changed the ending. I would have wrote something else up. I would have like last minute, like, Wes Craven is doing this shit. Let me rewrite our ending just in case if we ever decide we want to do another one, we can continue it on, and I get paid multiple times. Who knows what they did with this?
Yeah. Especially with somebody like Wes, who's known for being able to bring that new, updated, like, new character or new series or new slasher or new whatever. Like, slashers were just kind of getting into a thing when, Michael happened. And then you had Jason. And then all of a sudden, here comes Freddy. And then as slashers are becoming a little bit predictable and whatnot, you have Wes, who kind of reinvents the slasher based off pop culture and their fandom in what became Scream. So now you had the potential for this new age spin on werewolf lore that just kind of fell flat. And I mean, it was just kind of a bummer, dude. But anyway, as much as we love to step on a face while they're drowning, let's put this baby out of its misery. So when it comes to the obituaries, when it comes to the kill count, for me, I'm just going to keep it short and bitter. Look, I don't change my opinion when it comes to the script, the storyboard, and the arc trajectory. I thought it was great in concept. I really thought it had the potential to just be a dynamite idea, and a great story arc, like I said. I love the cast. I'm a Christina Ricci fan. She can do no wrong when it comes to me, and the late great Wes Craven is the late great Wes Craven, and that it will always be carved in stone. But the fact of the matter is, I do have a small soft spot for this movie because of the storyboard and the cast. But I can't go overly heavy on this one. The best it's going to get out of me is a 6, and even that's generous.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you at all points. I mean, to me, I mean, I'm probably gonna put it a little bit lower, but only because, like I said, like I always remember this movie, and I always had a different image of watching it, 20 years ago or so, versus like watching it now. I was like, man, how did I ever even think this movie was remotely even good when I watched it back in the day versus like watching it now. But like I said, yeah, I'm a huge Wes Craven fan, so that's automatically going to get bonus points because, if it was any other director that probably directed this movie other than, a small list of few directors that I'll give bonus points for, this would probably be like a 3 or a 4 maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd probably bump it up maybe a little bit more just because you can watch it. It's not that horrible. It's not like, it's not so bad that like you put it in 5 minutes later and you're like, okay, this is bad, like not that bad. But yeah, to me, like I said, I'll say at 5 at best.
Hey, no worries, man. Absolutely. 5.5, man. Are we agreement? Just meet in the middle?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think 5.5 is a good one.
All right, that's the way it's going to be, ghouls and fiends. That is just how we are going to establish it. Lock it up, write it in, chisel it in stone. 5.5 for the cursed. Cursed. But we get to continue on there, my beloved devil. And we are going to pitch it over. We're going to pitchfork it over to you, man, because we have ginger snaps to discuss.
Yeah, yeah. Unlike the last movie that we were just talking about with Cursed and writing potential sequels, this movie has two sequels to it and is, in my opinion, other than the old school werewolf movies like, American Werewolf in London, Howling, all the old good great movies, even like some of the Lon Chaney ones from back in the day. This is probably one of the essentials in the 2000s of werewolf movies. Like if you're a werewolf fan and you like werewolf movies and you're into horror movies around in the 2000 time, this was right in your wheelhouse because not only was it a cool movie, it had cool effects in it, it had cool chicks in the movie, it had a killer soundtrack, but it like it had blood and guts and everything you wanted in a movie, and like this is how a werewolf movie should be and how it should always be.
Absolutely. No, for sure. I mean, it's a great cast and a great young cast before they even really like popped off and stuff like that. But I mean, Emily Perkins, came out as the young Beverly in It, and everybody knows how much we love the Saska sisters when it comes to this show. And you've got Catherine Isabel, you've got American Mary playing the other sister before American Mary.
Yep, yep, yep.
And you've also got Mimi Rogers. I mean, it's a cool cast. It's young. It's kind of a Canadian-based, cast and stuff as well when it comes to that. But it's a fun design on a movie too because it's got a little bit of that awkward teen female angst to it. It's a very just interesting. It's interesting when it comes to that too. I mean, you've got these sisters who are just kind of in and obsessed with the ideas of like shooting like photography or mini movies about each other's deaths.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was the cool part of the whole entire movie. Like the very beginning of the movie, you find out that these girls are like obsessed and obsessed with death, and they made this pact where if one's gonna go, they're gonna go together, and how they're gonna kill themselves. And then all of a sudden, you see the older sister Ginger dead on a fence post, and you're like, oh shit, she's dead already. Then you realize, oh, I can see her gaunts, and they're just making all these just horrific death scenes that eventually is like is a project for a school project. and it kind of reminded me of like myself in school showing like weird stuff or making my teachers go to goregallery.com and like what the hell is wrong with you, like why would the hell would you send me to these kind of things, or even the crazy horror movies that we made, low budget movies when we're in high school for media classes and stuff like that. So it reminded me a lot of that stuff that I was doing, at the time. It was just cool, and like I said, it was just fun to, two sisters that are, just into the macabre. And like you said, it's like, most movies that we see are teenage boy kind of movies and growing of age. This is kind of more of like the girl side of it. They're young, they kind of stick together, they're kind of weird, their health issues are kind of odd. So
Yeah,
apparently they're older and haven't had their periods yet, and Ginger just starts to have it at like 16 or 17 or how old she is in this movie. So it's definitely that, like, movie where, they're going out, they're trying to get revenge. They get bit, she gets bit by gets attacked by a werewolf. And then the cool thing about this movie was, in most movies, you have certain ways you got to kill werewolves. You got to use the silver bullet. You got to do this. They kind of took away that kind of lore, because while they were being attacked and they're running away, this werewolf gets smashed by a car, by a van, and gets blown in a million pieces, and that you could kill it with a van apparently. And I thought that was kind of a cool take on, like, basically like the whole lycanthrope is that, like, yeah, it's not exactly how it is in the movies that you see. It's just they're, they can be killed just the same ways, as any other animal.
right. Absolutely. It's just like, yeah, whether it's, silver bullet, all that kind of stuff, but like, sharp sticks kind of thing. But yeah, no, just a aggressively driving blunt object can do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, so it's cool because the and again, even like Cursed, it has a really good arc to the story. Because you've got these two sisters who are thick as thieves with this blood death pact. The one is now a werewolf, going through all these changes, personality, physical, violent, mental, all this kind of stuff. And you have her sister not really sure exactly like what to make of it. Like, she's trying to be supportive and she's trying to look out for her, but at the same time, I mean, she's scared to death. She's locking Ginger in like the bedroom, and it's just like, I she's transforming, she's wild, she's crazy. I don't know what to do, but it's my sister.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's just kind of funny too, because like throughout this whole entire movie, like, like you said, that Ginger got the curse, which is kind of funny because there's people who get, werewolves. It's called having the curse, and she's talking about the curse of being a woman
Yeah.
and getting that womanhead curse, and they're like. The mom was like, "Oh yeah, all this stuff is just normal," and it's like, yeah, not, going out and, basically like raping a boy and turning him into like a werewolf again, because obviously it's blood. Anytime any blood is being shared, and she had unprotected sex, which infected one of the guys. She's going out eating dogs and stuff like that. She's growing a tail and like all this crazy stuff. That does not happen. That's not normal female hormones.
Right. No, exactly. And it's that like, and it's that same kind of thing because you've got Bridget like trying to be like the strong one and trying to like make these decisions and be tough, you know, and then you've got you know secret agent Mrs. Kensington, taking care of like trying to like keep everything going. I mean, you've got Mimi Rogers' character who's kind of like doesn't seem to understand, of course, but she's just trying to corral the madness.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like it because when it gets towards the end of the movie, she's finding. She knows these kids are, into the weird shit, and she assumed something else bad happened because she finds these fingers in the lawn. And the dad was like, "Oh, they're fake fingers. These girls are always doing shit, fucking, weird shit." And then she kind of like looks and she's like, "I don't know, man." And then she's like, "Oh, go get Ginger. I don't care what trouble it is. I'm gonna burn down the house and we'll escape. Like, what about Dad? Dad don't give a shit. It's just gonna
Right.
be us women." So it was, yeah, I like that. She was like, even before she knew exactly what was happening, she just thought maybe like Ginger might have killed somebody or something like that instead, which she sort of did, but like not in a sense of she killed her trying to eat her because she's a werewolf. She thought she was just killed somebody just in general. So I thought it was kind of funny that the mom wasn't like willing to like just burn the house and just go and make a new life.
Yeah, and I mean that I is something I really kind of like about the way of trying to like bring everything in. But the one thing I actually found to be very interesting that a lot of people would consider the kind of like the love interest kind of thing is that a local like just drug addict like dealer kind of guy is becoming like Bridget's like asset to try to corral Ginger back into like sisterhood. And I was like, of all people that you're gonna like trust with these big decisions, as a guy that likes to get high.
Yeah, yeah, which I liked his character too because he was kind of like he was your misconception of like drug dealers and stuff like that, where like he was a grower and he was kind of like he was into the scientifical part of making pot and stuff like that, where he kind of figured, oh yeah, he's like, oh, they're just like, we hit you hit an animal. He's like, oh, I think I've hit a lycanthrope. And then he goes to and Bridget's like, yeah, yeah. He's like, you probably don't even know what a lycanthrope is, and then obviously she knows what it is, and then they get this kind of bond together, knowing, being like, okay, he's the weird kind of guy too, and she's, they're weird, and then like he goes and figures out, all right, let me look up some information, finds out that you can get this kind of this chemical from like pressing these plants and making it stuff like that with all this stuff like that, and they come up to with a potion or like a serum to cure this viral disease, which is lycanthropes. And it actually does work because they do it to the horny temple teenager boy that got infected while she had sex when he had sex with Ginger. And as soon as that gets into his system, he kind of wakes up and goes, "What the hell's going on?" Like,
Right. And it was just kind of interesting, sort of that like moment of clarity, that kind of like snapping back to like the real world, like getting back into like your actual consciousness, and it was
yeah,
just kind of interesting like that. But what did you think about the like kind of the continuity and kind of like the companionship that between them, like while they're trying to kind of keep Ginger on like the level?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of. I know, like, I like the fact that Bridget was trying to pretend to begin with for a little bit while that was her that was turning in to the werewolf, and obviously, the guy like eventually figures it out that it's Ginger, and I like the fact that the sister, is the sisters are always trying to be together, and I like the fact that like before Ginger got bit, she was kind of more of like this loner kind of girl, kind of like that. I mean, she always looked good. I always liked Catherine, so she always looked good anyway. But then once she started getting into this, I think the werewolf started bringing out the sensuality and the sexuality of her. So she started, coming out, going to school, and all of a sudden, all the boys started noticing her. Like, oh my God, she's kind of hot. They didn't notice her before. All
Yeah.
she did was just put on some more skimpier clothes. She didn't really look much different. It's not like she did very much. She didn't do very much of a makeover to like all she did was just show her a little bit of extra skin, and you're like, oh my God, she's hot. Like, but
Seriously.
but yeah, I like that. I like the fact like that. I liked her slow transformation in this movie to begin with, where like I said, she's got the tail. She's constantly trying to shave her legs all the time because her legs are super hairy. She gets that kind of um what's her name, Rogue from X-Men, white
Oh yeah.
stripe in her hair. and starts getting the the long fingernails, and eventually gets to start getting the teeth a little bit. And even when they go into a full of werewolf transformation, I thought it was cool because it's very, and sometimes in some movies, not a lot of movies, there has been some, but I like the fact that at this time when movies that they kind of differentiated the male werewolf versus the female werewolf. You could tell that it was a female werewolf in this movie.
No, for sure. And I think it's interesting that you bring up that as well, because like you get, because starting off with the whole like all of a sudden she's being noticed by like the boys and stuff like that, which is it makes me laugh a little bit, because it's like almost like a slight precursor to what became like some of the rom-coms of like the early 2000s, where all of a sudden the nerdy girl that likes to paint and wears glasses, you know ends up a boy that likes her takes her to the prom, and all she does is wear like a pretty dress and leaves her glasses at home and has her hair down, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, she's beautiful. It's like,
Yeah,
wait, what are you talking about? Like, okay, her hair's down and she's not wearing her glasses. Like, what are you talking about?
yeah,
But it's that same like, yeah, kind of thing though too, where the fact that they actually kept the genders specific when it came to the werewolves, where the average person and the average werewolf movies, granted, are very male dominant, so let me put that out there anyway. But in general, werewolves have always just simply been considered a wolf first, wolf body consistently, regardless of the gender. This movie kept it right on Front Street, that yeah, she's a werewolf, but she is a werewolf, and we're not going to let you forget that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool, like and stuff like with the transformation and like I said, the femaleness of it and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah, I think it's yeah, with the putting down the hair and the glasses. I always call it like the Superman complex, where it's like literally nobody knows it. Clark and Superman, all he has to do is just take off his glasses. Wait, Superman doesn't wear glasses. Duh. That's why they can't be the same. Like, this chick is ugly. That can't be her. I mean, that chick puts her hair in a ponytail and wears glasses. This girl doesn't. Like, it's like, yeah, it's always like those movies where it's like, yeah, we're gonna make over this ugly duckling, and like the actresses that they always get in these movies are like beautiful actresses to begin with, and all they did was just throw a little muck on them for a second, and it's like, I'm like, nah, yeah, no, she was hot even when she was Geezer. And like I said, and in this movie, no disrespect to Emily Perkins, because I love her. I've always loved her in all the movies. Yeah, she definitely. I mean, out of the two sisters, she's definitely the more homelier looking
Yeah,
version of it. So it's like, yeah. So it would have been different to have switched the roles in that, if you're doing that concept, where if it would have been Emily Perkins' character that got bit and started becoming more sensual and more sexual, and guys started following her around, that would be a bigger transformation, because like I said, Emily's a little bit more of your girl next door
yeah,
versus Catherine, who's you know way hotter.
for sure. No, absolutely. But by the traditional definition, as well as just the aesthetic like looks and
Yeah,
stuff like that of how it would be, for sure. So so here's the thing, Devil. So as we move towards the obituaries and our kill count for Ginger Snaps, we already spoke on it. You addressed it right at the top. This movie's got sequels. In fact, this movie's got a sequel and a prequel.
yeah.
So, how do you want to go into telling our beloved Fangs about the ending of this movie, since we've already let them know that there's more Ginger Snaps to be enjoyed?
Well, I think by now, if you haven't watched any of the Ginger Snaps movies, I mean, it's with the internet, it's you can kind of tell what's going on. So yeah, and I guess we've already spoiled that there are multiple Ginger Snaps movies. Yeah, the ending of this movie, you know, they kill off Ginger, and Emily is Bridget infected herself with the virus, to become a lycanthrope, and that basically kind of segues into the second movie, which is basically her trying to keep herself from becoming a werewolf, and Catherine is a ghost, I think, or something,
Like some
something like that. Yeah, and then the third
mental
movie, I like the second
spirit
one.
or
Then
guardian or
yeah,
something.
yeah. Yeah. Then the third movie is a prequel, which is a really weird one because it's like them back in like Salem times or some shit. Like I don't know.
Which
It
I,
was
I
such a
mean,
weird.
yes, I love that, but it was so weird.
Yeah, it's just a weird prequel because it's like, wait, you got a prequel to a movie about two girls that were just two girls playing girls. Why were they? What do you need to know about them before she turned into a werewolf? They were just regular teenage girls, and then all of a sudden this movie came out, and I'm like, okay, so they're descendants from some other stuff, so they were kind of chosen to be I'm like, I don't know,
It,
but
it,
I still love them. I still
I
love
still
all
don't
of
know
them,
either.
but
The prequel actually reminds me a lot of Christy Swanson's Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like when she would
yeah,
have all those dreams about like her about being a descendant and her ancestors that were all slayers that had like the birthmark kind of a thing and they all basically
yeah,
looked the same. But that kind of made sense on that trajectory. But yeah, exactly the way you said it on this one, it was very strange. It was like, wait, so I guess these girls' bloodline is tasty and they are chosen to be
yeah.
transformed and stuff
So
like
it's
that.
like, yeah, so it's like basically saying that, like, if Ginger, obviously the reason why in this movie Ginger snaps, she's going out, she's trying to get revenge on this girl and try to kill her dog and stuff like that. And there's been a bunch of, the lycanthrope has been going around killing a bunch of dogs and stuff like that. And obviously they look and they fall and they see there's a dead dog and there's some blood, and they're like, oh, you got blood on you, realizing that she had her period, and the period is what basically brought the lycanthrope to her and why it attacked her and not attacked Bridget.
Yeah.
And now you're basically saying that it didn't really matter about the period blood. They could have been in their home. They would have been attacked anyway.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting thing, and as like a final like little just kind of ha ha thing that I always thought was a little bit funny is yes, because the movie does end with Bridget infecting herself, but then the sequel is about her like stopping trying to stop herself from becoming a werewolf, and it's like, well then what the fuck did you do that to yourself for?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I was like, well, then it's like, if you were trying to stop yourself as a werewolf, and you already made that serum for the one kid, if it worked for him, but maybe it didn't. So it's like, where is this guy? Is this guy, is the boy completely healed? Is he not a werewolf now? Or if he is, then why wouldn't you just take that serum? And that the second movie would have been like, hey, inject yourself real quick, movie over.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. So let's pop into the obituaries, buddy. Where do you rank this on the kill?
Yeah, for me, like I said, this movie is always gonna have a higher spot just because the fact that, it is a good werewolf movie. It's a good werewolf movie for, I guess, the turn of the century or whatever you want to call it, like I said, like that, going in from those original werewolf movies. And even like I said, even watching it now, I mean, like I said, I think this movie came out in 2000, and we were talking about Curse that came out in 2005. And even just the CGI, and this, where this movie was mainly all just prosthetics and makeup and all that stuff like that the whole entire time. This guy didn't want to use any digital effects. Like, that was the whole
Yeah,
purpose. He wanted all practical effects. He wanted all makeup. So he went the complete opposite route of what Curse would have done, what eventually did, with more of the CGI stuff. And even now movies now where you have Underworld and all that kind of stuff that do have some, practical effects, but they do rely on so much CGI for werewolf movies now, where it was good to see a movie where it's more back to the originals and stuff like that, where it's more makeup and it's more that kind of stuff. So I did like it. Like I said, and like I said, it's a good story. I love the actors. I love the premise of the movie. I love the fact that these girls were basically, it opened up with them killing themselves in many different ways. It was super cool, and like everybody, even the teacher was appalled, and I loved it. So yeah, so for me, like I said, this movie is definitely on the higher scale of werewolf movies. So for me, I have to give this movie a 7.
No, I'm definitely with you on that one for sure. I think it's overall solid. It's a really good story. It's a fun story. It's a fresh take. As the only real weird part of it is their design when it came to sequels and stuff like that. But again, there always tends to be flubs when it comes to sequels of movies and stuff like that. But the storyline's fun. It's flirty. It's kind of interesting as well. Again, like we said, where it's like what may or may not have actually drawn the werewolf to attack Ginger is kind of an interesting, like, who's. Do you think it's her becoming a lady, or do you think it was just destined to she was destined to be a target? So it's definitely solid on that. Yep, I love the lack of CGI. I like the fact that it's the standard proper effects and stuff like that. It's a good look, a good take, and it's an enjoyable story. It really is. And like we also discussed before, especially with this recent comparison, is like it's a much more rewatchable movie on a more consistent level. I'm much more likely to watch Ginger Snaps than I am Cursed. Especially at our ripe old ages that we are now and stuff like that. So I'll match you, man. I think it's solid. I think 7 is the way. I think it's definitely proper, man. And I'll meet you right where you're at, man. 7 for Ginger Snaps, and that means fatality. In fact, that means flawless victory. This is a pretty lopsided showdown for us, as you've got Ginger Snaps taking out the cursed at 7 to 5.5, and that's the way it is for our beloved Fangs. That is how it is. Victory to the devil. Horns up, Fangs out.
What's up? It's the devil here again with a new edition of the devil movies. This time we're gonna watch a few movies with the devil in the movie. This time we're gonna start off with The Prophecy. Have you seen this yet? With Christopher Walken and all the angels? And guess what? Who's in it? Lucifer. Yes, the devil. Played by my good friend Viggo Mortensen. Yeah. Have you checked out this movie yet? It's pretty cool. It's good. It's evil. It's got angels. It's got devils. It's got everything you want. It's got blood and guts. Check it out. Check out Lucifer. Loving all you monkeys. Talking monkeys. Check it out.
Oh, freaks alike. Freaks alone. Devilish freaks. Blood-sucking freaks. Blood-sucking zombies. Devilish carnivores. It is all about full moon features here with Vampire and Devil. That is all about what we're about today. It is going to be fun, man. Yours truly, as well as the ever so handsome Devil, love their B-movie full moon trauma goofiness. There could be some trauma in our futures, but that is not today. We are all about the full moon. Isn't that right, my friend?
Oh yeah, we love ourselves a little Charles Band action and the Full Moon Team. From anywhere from, the Puppet Master series, the Subspecies series, the Killjoys, the Gingerbreads, the Demonic Toys. We love all things that go bump in the night when it comes to full moon entertainment. But tonight we're going to do a little bit of castling, a little bit of hassling, a little bit of freaking, a little bit of craziness when we matched these two movies that we felt were somewhat similar in the style and story-ish, kind of combination together with lots of combos and freaks and geeks and blood, and it also features our good friend from Reanimator
Yes.
in both of these movies. So that's the common sort of a common denominator is that we have our beloved Jeffrey Combs
Oh
in
yeah.
both of these movies, and we decided to pick, Castle Freak versus Lurking Fear.
Absolutely, for sure. So why don't we start off a little bit with Castle Freak? That'll be fun. Again, our beloved Jeffrey Combs, but we've also got Barbara Crampton joining us in this movie. And the idea premise of this movie, as far as like the hero's kind of backstory, is actually definitely one that I can get behind because it's about that just inner pain and suffering type thing. Very similar, in my opinion, to when we discussed Antichrist, because the movie takes place with this married couple who inherit an Italian castle, from their deceased relative. So they're going to check it out, liquidating the estate, basically doing all the things that you would do when a loved one passes away, whether it's liquidate the estate, whether it's collect your inheritance, or even in this case, kind of that combination of both, where, hey, they inherited this, but they're also discussing with the person in charge, like how to kind of liquidate everything in general as to whether or not they want to keep this thing. Because it's like, well, it's a giant castle in Italy, and, we're from like Detroit, so to speak. So like, they're kind of checking all of that out. But it's that inner demon. So they're with their daughter who's blind. And then you find out throughout the movie that the father is a recovering alcoholic, and it's been stressful as far as regaining the trust of his wife, because due to his drinking and a car accident that he got into, not only did it cause the daughter to become blind, but it also killed their young son.
Yeah, it starts off pretty crazy, you know what I mean? It's like your typical, you have a long lost relative that you didn't even know existed. And it's awesome. Like I said, it's a big, huge castle, and it's actually the whole movie was actually filmed in a legit real castle in Italy.
Yeah.
So it had that, like, that atmosphere of it. And yeah, of course, you have the mother and the father not really seeing eye to eye to get in, and they're like, and the people who were making up the house were like, oh, we got this room ready and we got that room ready for your daughter, and she was like, yeah, make up another room because he ain't sleeping here right now. So it's kind of like one of those things where he's like, oh, I'm trying to get better, and come on, we're in a new place, let's get some little nookie action. And they're like, nah. She's like, nah, we're good. Barbara Crampton's like, nah, we're gonna cut that shit out right now because because of you, we lost our kid, and now we have a blind daughter that we're gonna allow to 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 walk around in this castle way too many times by herself, being a blind lady. It's like I can understand, like I've had people, and I know people who are blind that live in a house. Yeah, once you know the where everything kind of is, you can kind of go around, but even as a sighted person going in these castles, I would get lost. And this girl is like searching throughout this whole entire castle, and not. I'm like, what? Why is the blind girl by herself right now? Like, like I understand. Like the dad was like, at the one time when they were doing it, that he's looking at like what kind of looks like a scrapbook of like maybe like past relatives, and kind of like a old photo book. So he's kind of like paying attention to this. But then again, it's like, how does she? Like I said, she's gonna bump into things as much, as much. So it's like, yeah, it's like, then all of a sudden, she gets lured in by the kitty cat.
Yeah. By the way, and I can't really blame anybody but myself because I picked this movie in our full moon showdown. But yeah, forgot about that. Yeah, Mrs. Vamp was not stoked with me when that cat did not make its way through the whole movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of had that one coming. Sorry, Mrs. Vamp. Not my fault, but totally my fault. Yeah. But yeah, so you learn about this, this castle freak, this freak monster that's chained up in the downstairs and just kind of lives off whatever he can get his hands on, whoever he can get his hands on. fur babies that wander too close, which, we learned about the hard way. And the funniest thing too is as the family is starting to get, I guess, situated in a castle, like whether it be kind of living style or at least for the foreseeable future while they're handling the business aspect, the castle freak finds a way to free himself at the expense of a thumb.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of one thing. It's like I can understand, like, people are like, why is he eating the cat? You got to realize this guy has been locked up, tortured in this basement. You find out by the woman who owned the house, his mother, or I think she was, or whatever she was. But she was like, beating him with like a whip that had like spikes and stuff. So she was definitely. But then again, she was feeding him periodically because you saw her bringing food down, and that's what starts off the movie is she's going down to feed them, and the cat's there, and the cat's chilling around the freak, and it's all good and dandy. Then I would assume that the old lady had a heart attack or something like that, being old, and that's what kind of like drives this like guy crazy. But then again, it's like, he's being tortured and he wants to, not be there anymore. And it's like all of a sudden, after X amount of months of being alone and not being fed because of her passing away and these new people coming in. Yeah, he decides to like, you know, gnaw off his freaking hand partly and get it cuffs off, and it's like, well, why wouldn't you just do that in the first place? You know what I mean? If I'm getting beat to death and tortured to death and all this crazy shit, like I would have done that years ago and ate her first before I ate anybody else.
Yeah. No, for sure. And it's that kind of interesting thing too, where it's like, kind of has that like really warped version of like see no evil or Carrie to it, because yeah, you see him, she's just teeing off on this guy with this cat of nine tails, just absolutely just taking him to town, honestly, kind of like Passion of the Christ style.
Yeah.
It's hardcore, man. She's really laying it into him, and it's crazy. But yeah, so as that's how the movie starts off, and you kind of get a little backstory on the castle freak's, incarceration. It's not overly explained how the castle freak became a thing. Was he born that way? Was it, almost like in Hills Have Eyes, where it's like, well, it's bad conditions for young people, so they warp over time, kind of thing. But yeah, he, basically self-mutilates to get himself out of these cuffs, but also at the same time, getting back to the family, is the mother and father are like, they're really juggling their emotions, because like the father, of course, is incredibly remorseful. They're trying to make it work. She wants to trust him again, but she's just got that deep-rooted hatred and disappointment for what he caused. And then he starts like seeing things mixed with like possible hallucinations. He's convinced that he sees his son's photo attached to the wall of this tomb, and it matched the age of his son, because it was this Giorgio tomb of a 5-year-old, and that was the age of their son. And the wife is just not having it. She's like, no, you're feeling guilty. You caused this. You're not allowed to feel certain amounts of remorse because of you did this. But how do you think this, affects me? And that argument also basically causes him to also like fall off the wagon. He goes to the bar, he's drinking himself stupid, and then in typical idiot fashion, blames it on being lonely, but in typical idiot fashion, dude finds a woman to hook up with in their house.
Yeah.
Which never ends well.
Yeah. Let's just take her down to. Well, I mean, I guess like if you're going to bring a lady of the night to your house, at least it is a castle. Which that castle they said has like 100 and something rooms or something like that. So at least you might be able to get away with it a little bit more, but not when you have a castle freak living in the basement. And the crazy thing about it is like he picks up out of all the prostitutes that are probably throughout Italy. And trust me, I've lived in Italy. There are prostitutes fucking everywhere. So he picks up the one prostitute that apparently is related to the cop. it's,
Seriously.
it's
And
just like okay, yeah. He's like, "Where's my sister at? I knew you took my sister home." I'm like, "Wait, your sister is a prostitute? Like what?"
right. And of course that blows the cover of the infidelity because he's like, I'm lonely. And she's like, no, you were drunk. And it's also crazy too because she gets taken out in like epic fashion. In fact, incredibly weird mutilation fashion as well because Castle Freak knocks her down from like a C cup to an A cup.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it gets a little. You find out, Castle Freak is a little bit of a freaky, deaky leaky too. He's into mutilating. He's into women's body parts. He roams around the castle trying to get around with the little. I don't know. She's probably like 14 or 16 or whatever, little girl, and the little girl was like kind of into it for a second, and she's like, "Oh wait, no, don't do this," and then like it's crazy. Yeah, it's weird though, because this guy's like, obviously he's lurking around the house and stuff like that. And it's like, as far as I know, I mean, I know it's not like Marvel superpowers, but most people who usually are blind or get blinded heightened senses. This chick is her hearing is horrible. She hears stuff when she wants to hear it, but then all of a sudden she's like not paying. This guy's like lurking around her room, and she's like, oh, whatever. And I mean, and I thought that was kind of cool too, like because when he was doing it, he realizes that she can't see. He's putting her hand there like that, so it does tell you that this, even though this freak has been mutilated and beaten, he still has somewhat of his wits because he's able to figure out. And yeah, he's just I guess he's just trying to get, all those years being locked up and beaten, just trying to get his trying to get his little dingaling wet.
Yeah, seriously, where it's kind of like, well, I haven't been exposed to any of this, and it's kind of like, yeah, for good reason.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's crazy with all that kind of stuff too. But like, yeah, but that's also one of the things I also always found to be like particularly interesting about Castle Freak as well too, is because like I love Jeffrey Combs, getting back to him just as an actor in those type of like really like unique type of roles. Like I mean, you and I love him in Reanimator. We love him in a lot of movies. Of course he's best known for that kind of stuff, but he's got just a lot of other movies, whether it be like Faust, whether it be like Satanic, that are like little gems of what is just interesting about him as a character actor, which I just love. And Castle Freak is no different. And it's also kind of interesting as well too, because like you and I are going to discuss it also again shortly because he's in our next movie as well. But he's younger looking in this movie than he is in the next movie. And the movie Castle Freak came out earlier than Lurking Fear.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was kind of, I guess it's just like the way that they have them portrayed, or yeah, but it's kind of weird. Yeah, especially when you watch both these movies kind of back to back, and you expect like one's older than a little bit older than the other ones. One's a little, you would think that he would look a little older in this one, and he looks a little younger in that one. Like, wait, are you sure that this movie? Maybe this movie came out before that, but no, it's yeah. I mean, I think throughout all his career, it's been like that. With some movies, he looks super, super young. I mean, even when you look back at Reanimator
Yeah.
versus some of the movies that he's doing now, he looks younger almost sometimes now than he did in Reanimator that came out 30 some years ago. So, yeah, he's like he's always been an odd guy, but like I said, especially when it comes to that kind of aging kind of stuff, because it's like some movies he looks super old and sometimes he looks good. But yeah, I've always been a huge fan of his. I think he's one of those actors that's like he can pretty much take on a role, and I guarantee. I mean, a lot of his roles are very you know typical. He's playing a lot of the same kind of type casting kind of characters sometimes, but he always puts on a good show every time he comes out. Like I said, he's a super cool and super humble guy. Like he's like down to earth kind of guy.
No, for sure. And you and I have both had the pleasure of meeting him, and he's definitely he ages well, man. Because I didn't meet Jeffrey Combs for the first time until like whenever the hell it was I met him at a Monster Mania, probably about like I don't know 6 7 years ago, whatever it was. And I mean he looks like Dr. Herbert West.
Yeah.
I mean he definitely ages well. But yeah, he's just a cool cat. But I love him in these type of roles. I just think he's really really good at them. There's just because you and I also have discussed this multiple times when it comes to like casting and like who they cast and how they look like what they look like in these movies as actual humans, is that one of the things I love about Jeffrey Combs is his acting chops mixed with the fact that he's just like an average guy. I mean, the dude's just a common garden vegetable as far as looks go. He's just an everyman, but he does these just excellent, unique character roles, and I dig that about him.
Yeah, yeah.
So as we like move on and we start like getting a little bit into like the last like third of the movie and stuff like that, when it comes to like Castle Freak, one of the things I really found very interesting about the movie was actually the freaks in kind of insatiable desire to like kind of be loved and get involved with the family members, kind of Elephant Man style, like wearing sheets covering his like deformities just to like get close to people, whether it's for bad reasons or for just trying to touch on them. And I thought that was an interesting way that they kind of start like working towards the climax of this movie, as he starts really roaming the castle, and he's just got his like sheets to kind of protect his hideous look.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's almost kind of like the Frankenstein or something like that, where he's a monster. Of course, he's deformed. Which I mean, I think they were talking about like he was kind of just made deformed, and he wasn't really naturally deformed. He was just, I mean, he was considered. I think he was like a bastard child or stuff like that. And like I guess there was a good child that came out and they liked him, but he passed away, and they didn't like this guy, so they kind of just stuck him. So he's kind of have that like where he's been alone for his whole entire life, and he wants some kind of love and affection, and the only affection he ever had was the getting beaten and starved to death all the time. So he kind of sees this family kind of coming in, and he's like, oh, maybe these guys will be a little bit different or something like that. And you kind of feel for him for a little bit, but then yeah, he starts doing some unquestionable stuff throughout the movie, and you're like, oh, okay, never mind. This guy is like, I think all those years of torture is kind of just finally drove him to this monster that he really is now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is also actually part of what this movie really is based off of, which is actually a real story of two brothers, one that's a prince and the other one just happened to be like hideously deformed and kind of shunned by the world.
Yeah.
So like as we start like making towards like the craziness where it's like you've got like this movie that's like preying on human weakness, but it's got that really crude feel to it. Like, what did you find to be like, what did you find to be a particularly like interesting as it moved towards like the climax of this, as like, the body counts and like the torture kind of started amping a bit?
It's just like I said, I like the fact that things were happening around this castle. He had the mirror that was breaking, and no one had been able to figure out like what it was. And these cops, they're finding the dead cat. they find the dead hooker, and they find all these things that are happening, and it's kind of pointing towards, Jeffrey Combs's character, because, we already know that he's unstable, he's doing all this crazy stuff, he's drinking, he's making up these, ridiculous story, because who knows whether, he's seeing, like you said, he's seeing his dead son and
Yeah.
stuff like that, where it's like, okay, maybe yeah, it's like maybe this is the guy that's been doing all this crazy stuff, and it's like they were saying earlier, when he felt like there was somebody breaking in the house, and he goes to the cop and he was like, I need you to search this whole entire house, and he was like, there's 100 billion rooms in this house, I don't have enough the manpower, but yet when they find his dead sister, they're like, we're gonna check every room in this house, and even Jeffrey Combs is like, wait a minute, you wouldn't check it and you didn't believe it, but now you think that I did something. Now all of a sudden, now you have the time to check the house, and secretly the freak is in the back going.
Exactly. And it gets to that very Shining feel of it too. Like when the cop's moving around looking for things. I mean, Jeffrey Combs' character clubs the shit out of the dude, like as he's like walking through the living room.
Yeah.
So
it starts getting kind of gnarly towards the end.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so, what did you think about the actual climax of this movie, where you've got the freak just running rampant, but Jeffrey trying to still convince everybody that he's not crazy, and this guy is like, there's something else that's causing all of this, basically framing it.
Yeah. It's like, it's one of those, like you said, it's one of those things, like, you never know, it's like, the boy who cried wolf or something, to the extent like that, where it's very, I'm telling you the guys the truth, and they're like, yeah, because I mean, like, who's gonna believe that there's some ghost or thing or some kind of monster going around killing everybody, in most, especially in the, this being a real world kind of like situation, where it's like the monsters are usually the real people, so they're all like, like I said, didn't this, they get into it where it's like, it gets into it, it's pretty crazy, it's insane, it's such a crazy movie about it, like just a dude that's gonna eat all your body parts.
and that's the thing I like about, like, just the eventual ending of the movie, when like the family's just like, we just gotta get out of here, like this is clearly not our house anymore, regardless of how we want to look at this. The castle freak's going crazy, he's like banging these chains on like this coffin, and he's just kind of owning the area. And you see the family like just kind of huddled together, and they're just like, dude, like this guy, like we just gotta go, like we just need to get out. And that was something I found to be like very, very interesting about the way they chose to have this movie end.
It's like you said in the very beginning, they're all like, we need to liquidate and sell all this stuff, so they figured, like, shit, hell yeah, that's why the first time he asked, he's like, man, how much do you think this shit's gonna go? Because you gotta realize, man, they're like, well, the castle hasn't been really kept up very well, and it's like, who gives a shit, man? A castle in Italy, even crappy as it can be, can still be worth more than what those people probably had anyway. So it's like, hell yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I just want to get this and get the hell out of here and get my money. But then again, it's one of those things like, him and his wife are not doing too good. So it's like, do you really want to sell everything and right now? Because, if you sell it, you're going to have to give her half of your shit.
Right. And I feel like it just kind of gets to a point really where they're like, you know what? Fuck it. We're just out. Like,
yeah.
You know what? And I found that to just be a very interesting ending, but not necessarily a bad one either. Because most of the time, especially when it comes to this genre, you're just kind of expecting it to be like okay, there's got to be a final this. Do they get the villain, and maybe the villain's not actually dead? Do they get the villain, and he just is dead? Does the villain win, and he just offs the family in whole? It really just kind of ended on an interesting but unique note where it was literally like, you know what, we just prefer our lives. You know what? You can just have this place, dude.
Yeah.
You just
Right.
want it. You just want it more.
Yeah, yeah, it kind of reminded me of like the ending of like what movie we've talked about before, and I think the first episode, the Amityville Horror, where they were just like, they just got the fuck out of there, like whatever, we don't even care for our shit, like let's just go.
Oh no, for sure. And it's got, but again, it's got all that same kind of fun stuff that you expect from like Full Moon, kooky kills, weird little moments. Personally, I thought the eye biting scene from the police officer was just really bizarre because I was like, okay, he's trying to check out the house, the castle, and it's like, what is this underneath this sheet? And it's the castle freak. That's just like, let me nibble on your eyeball.
Yeah,
But totally, bro. But I always thought that was just a really cool, like, a really cool, like, slightly underwhelming, don't get me wrong, ending to the movie. But still just kind of a cool way to do it. Again, that very, like, nod back to Amityville Horror, like, hey, we're going to take it back 20 years and do another movie that, like, is a little anticlimactic because you'd think there would be definitive body deaths to establish the victor. But it's just like, you know what? It's just better if we just leave and just take the loss, take the L.
yeah,
For sure, man. So let's talk a little bit about the obituaries. Let's talk a little bit about the kill rankings for this one. I personally love this movie. I always have, but it's definitely it's very Full Moon. It's very very B horror. The creature is a weird one but I love the fact that it is still practical effects. It's definitely not CGI. And while I don't think the movie is like the most like amazing movie ever written, I don't believe that for a second. I do think that it's a fun movie. I think it's got a solid rewatchability. Again, depending on the common populace's how they like their movies, like whether or not they like them polished or not, will affect kind of the watchability of this movie. But overall, I do think that the movie's solid. I do think it's fun, and it is a movie that I find that I can go back to, a few times a year. So while I think the movie is, a 6.5 at best, I do think that the kooky nature and the fun behind it, and the fact that I like Jeffrey Combs, just makes me want to give it a 7. And that's what I'm going to give it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I gotta agree with you on those. It's one of those ones where it's like on the scale of full moon movies, well, number one being the best full moon movie, and maybe 100 or whatever being the worst, full moon movie. It's definitely like, it's definitely not in the top tier of movies, but it's definitely not in the lower tier either. It's somewhere. I feel like Castle Freak is one of those ones where it's kind of sort of in the middle. You know what I mean? It's not the greatest, it's not the best, but it's not the worst. And it definitely, like I said, it has some really cool, gnarly moments that you hadn't seen. I love, like I said, I love the cast. I love, Barbara Crampton. I love freaking Jeffrey Combs. So like I said, and I love the fact that it's filmed all legitimately within the same kind of area. It's actually filmed on location. It's not like studio made. And like I said, it's just like you said, watching it. It's been a while since I've watched it, but yeah, it's one of those ones where you can watch again and again, which is unlike some movies that a Full Moon has put out. There are some that you kind of wish you hadn't seen, or ones maybe you'll throw in once in a blue moon, and then there's other ones that that are like I said,
Once in a full moon.
yeah, once in a full moon, and then then there's like I said, there's other ones that you can watch over and over and over again. Where it's like I said, I think this one, like I said, puts about in the middle, so I'm okay with a 7.0 with this.
Cool, man. No, I'm definitely with you on that, and I definitely agree as well because there's plenty of full moon stuff that like I can watch on regularity. You know, I'm always down for subspecies. I love Killjoy. We both love Puppet Master, stuff like that. There's definitely upper echelon stuff, and there's also stuff that I enjoy, but I'm just like, I don't need to go out of my way to watch that all that much. You know, movies like Evil Bong and stuff like that, which are fun and I enjoy them because they're super kooky. But yeah, exactly. It's definitely a once in a full moon for some lower tier stuff that they put out and stuff like that. But yeah, man, sounds good to me. So that's the way it's gonna be there, Fangs, from Vampire and Devil straight to you guys. Castle Freak from Full Moon starring Jeffrey Combs, we are giving that a 7.0 on the obituaries. Now, let's move our way to its competition. We are going to talk about Jeffrey Combs.
Yay.
We are going to talk about Lurking Fear from 1994, the year right before Castle Freak, but Jeffrey Combs, for some reason, looks like 10 years older.
Yeah. You know, again, you know, another Full Moon, another Jeffrey Combs film. This one's definitely has that. Like I said, I picked this one mainly because it's sort of similar ish to, you know, Castle Freak. I mean, not really, but compared to some of the other Full Moon movies, I thought this one would pair kind of well with Castle Freak
Yeah.
versus some of the other ones. I mean, you had a couple other ones that maybe kind of are similar, but this is the closest one. I mean, it's a crazy story, you know. You know, it's got a lot of craziness in it. It starts off with, you know, with some craziness in it, and you know, and also, you know, just like the Castle Freak, you had you know, another actor or actress in that movie was Barbara Crampton, we talked about, and this one had our Hellraiser Ashley Lawrence, although I think she went as like Ashley Lauren or something like that before she was Ashley Lawrence. But you know, this movie was you know, before Hellraiser, I believe. And yeah, so this is kind of like what you know, how she got into the horror genre and the you know, the badass Hellraiser woman that we enjoy. And like I said, yeah, this movie is, yeah, completely different opposites, you know, style. The, you know, like I said, you know, Castle Freak, you know, people inheriting something. This one's more about like just these gnarly creatures that live underground that have been terrorizing this town for years and years and killing people. And it killed Ashley's character's sister years ago, and now she's a fighting kung fu kind of badass, you know, lurking monster beater killer, whatever you want to call her.
It's so weird, dude. And don't get me wrong, that's the thing. We love our Ashley Lawrence, dude. We love our Hellraiser. We know obviously our Fangs know that there is Hellraiser something coming for them. And it's so bizarre, dude. There's like, you know, yeah, she's this kung fu just badass chick, but it's like the story's based around her sister, and her sister has like a child, and it like they're like there's like this church as like the main kind of area of like basically where the majority of the movie takes place at. But yeah, you've got this like, you know, Descent style crazy creatures that are again practical effects, definitely not CGI, because they've got a little bit of that rubberness to them that the Castle Freak had. But it's a weird concept. It's just a weird design because it's not the first time either that this particular story has been done. This like Lurking Fear story. There was I think it was called like The Reckoning or something like that. But there was a movie in the late 80s that kind of tackled that Lurking Fear story earlier. But there's also a part of me that gets super giddy over the fact that it's yet another H.P. Lovecraft movie that Jeffrey Combs is starring in.
Yeah. Jeffrey Combs definitely loves his H.P. Lovecraft movies. He's like, you know, all into it. And I believe this one was directed by Stuart Gordon, I think. And he's done a lot. He's done the Reanimator movies and stuff like that. So yeah, it was pretty cool though. Like I said, it's such a weird storyline. It's like kind of revenge story as far as Ashley's side of it. They're trying to figure. They're in this hold up in this church, and they're gonna finally try to kill these monsters that are lurking down. Then you have another subplot story about this guy who just got out of prison,
Right.
and he's kind of just like figuring out where to go. And he's like, well, your dad hit a hole, or somebody in your family hit like a bunch of money, so you can do that. And then there's the gangsters that know about the money and stuff like that. So it's kind of like this, it's sort of like this movie is like a horror movie mixed in with an action thriller, because it's very like kind of have that like, you give me my money kind of, or I'm gonna shoot you kind of stuff. But then it's like they come in this church and they're like, like, dude, you guys came to the church at the wrong time. They're like, well, why so, man? Things are gonna happen. They're like, oh yeah, sure. And then all of a sudden these monster creatures start coming out of the ground. They're like, what the fuck's all this shit? And I'm like, well, I told you, and now you just fucked shit up. We had this whole plan, man, and we had a good plan. We were gonna blow this shit up, man. It was gonna go good. And then you guys just all had to come in here and fuck it up on the one day. Like, you couldn't have done any of this shit beforehand or after or whatever. But nope, you gotta come the day that we're doing this.
Yeah, like you couldn't have just waited till we left, like kind of a thing. Yeah, but this movie Devil is actually C. Courtney Joyner. It was Stuart Gordon did Castle Freak.
Oh yeah. I knew Stuart Gordon did one of them. I know that Stuart Gordon did one. I know both of them were kind of based off of Lovecraft films.
Yep.
I mean, not Lovecraft. But you know what I mean.
Oh, Lovecraft and
Lovecraft, not Lovedraft.
yeah, we love that place. But no, it is interesting when it comes to that kind of stuff, because the one thing though I will say about like Lurking Fear, simply because you brought it up just kind of with the Freudian slip, but it actually works good for the topic. I kind of wish Stuart Gordon had done this movie, because his style between not only just with Lurking Fear, but with movies like From Beyond and those type of movies, like Stewart is really good with the H.P. Lovecraft stuff. And one of the things I thought that kind of hurt this movie a little bit was actually that C. Courtney just isn't as experienced, not only as a director, but not even just with that type of mindset for stories or movies based off those type of stories.
Yeah.
So like it's a very strangely shot movie. I don't love the effects. I love the overall concept of the movie, and I think the creatures are actually really cool, and I think they look really rad. But it's a very strangely shot movie. The editing's very kind of wonky. Like, and what I mean is, like, even when you had the female fight scene, you would kind of see people kind of like they would kind of like come in from off the side of the screen kind of into the shot, and I felt like it took away from some of that action you were talking about, because like it's kind of like what we've also talked about before with certain things that, as the saying goes, it kind of breaks the fantasy.
Yeah.
And so it's got kind of a weird like look to it. Although when things really started getting gnarly with the lurkers or whatever, it got me. It kind of hooked me back into the movie again, because I loved when they started getting involved, and like, there some blood was getting spilled. But the way they were kind of setting up the action, the way they were trying to also shoot certain drama scenes, I felt was really flat, because it just lacked like some punch. It just didn't translate well, in my opinion.
Yeah, because it's weird, because it's like it feels like it should be an action movie, but then it wasn't very actiony. but then felt like it should be a horror movie, but then they
Yeah.
were putting in too much action in it, where instead of the horror, until until like you said, until the lurkers kind of come in, it was kind of like this, like, you owe me money, where's my money kind of feel, and it kind of took away from the story of like the lurkers and like those guys, like, to begin with, which you set us up, with these these people being in this in this church, and them trying to do all this stuff and try to blow it up and try to kill that, try to avenge all these people who have been, that people that came to this church, of all people who have survived from being attacked by these lurkers. And you can tell that these lurkers have been attacking this town and this village for for years and years, and then all of a sudden you get these people coming in, and all of a sudden it's like, understandably, why they're there, and which ties into the ending of the movie. But while you're in the middle of that movie, you're kind of like, okay, why are these characters even here for? This makes no sense. Like I said, eventually towards the end it kind of does, but by that time you're almost like, I don't even give a shit about these guys anymore now.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Like, I don't know if a lot of people would really give this movie a full chance and see it all the way through, if not for the fact that, like, when the lurkers kind of get into their gear and kind of get into their mode, it does give like a resurgence to it. But you and I have also talked regularly about the slow burn. And overall, I like this movie a lot, and I find it very entertaining. And I don't think it's that traditional slow burn by any means. By traditional sense, like when we talked about other movies that just have that long feel to it, and you're just like, good God. I just think this movie kind of spans, they just get a little bit too into backstories that don't really need to be that in depth. So just like you said, when all the cool shit starts happening and the bodies start hitting the floor and the lurkers are just lurking out, again, you kind of have to struggle to be like, do I give a fuck to see why they're a thing, or how more body count will they do? Or do I just want to move on to another movie?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and like,
I
you
was
don't
more in for
even
crime, but I know that
yeah.
but I know I can speak for her. Mrs. Vamp is a little bit more like, you got to get that hook into her. You got to give her a reason to want to continue. Versus you and I, we're 400 years old, and like we've seen it all, and it's like we're more invested in the understanding of seeing things through. Versus, Mrs. Vamp is a little bit younger. She was just so beautiful in that in her human years, but she is more about that. Like, you gotta get me. Don't make me wait.
Yeah, yeah. And even like you said, even when the monsters and the lurkers start coming, it's very short lived,
Yes.
and then they kind of explain the lurkers, but they really don't explain the lurkers a little bit.
Yeah.
You kind of find out that these lurkers are sort of like the what's that house, the hills have eyes, kind of wrong turn, kind of like inbreeding, sort of monstrous stuff like that. And that's where you find out, towards the end of this movie, which understandably why these gangsters are coming, that the main guy who came out of jail finds out that he's a descendant of these lurkers, and that's where the money was. And then they blow everything up, and they blow up the money. I mean, it's just like,
I know.
the whole purpose of this movie was well, I mean, you had three people. There's three agendas. There's the main people that want to kill the lurkers, which they don't do. There's the people, the gangsters who want the money, where they all die. And then you have the guy who got out of prison trying to figure out where he comes from, where he does find that part out, but loses all the money basically because it gets all blown up.
Right. And that's the thing. I don't know, dude. That's the thing that was kind of weird to me about this movie. And as much as I love it and it's fun, and again, we'll get into a little bit more detail, but there is a watchability to it. But in my opinion, it's not on the level of Castle Freak. But
Yeah.
There are certain things that I don't really kind of understand. It's kind of like, honestly, it reminds me of that scene in RoboCop that leads to Murphy's initial death, where the armored car villains are getting away, and the main guy opens up the bags, and he's like, "What the fuck, man? You burnt all the money." And the guy is like, "Dude, you asked me to blow up the vault. What was I supposed to do?"
Yeah.
It's kind of that same thing where it's kind of like, how stupid can a mofo be? Where it's like, okay, you're trying to rid yourselves of these incest inbreed creatures that are trying to kill you. You're trying to get back what was yours, or at least what you rightfully stole at one point. But in blowing up the house in the church, you blew up the whole thing you were there for. So you just had a bunch of your colleagues die. You had yourself get kind of beaten and slapped around all for a portion of this movie with no payout. Pun intended.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the crazy thing too, where like we've talked about with a lot of the movies, and we didn't really talk about it with the Castle Freak, but we can kind of intersplice with Castle Freak and Lurking Fear together at one time. But yeah, we talk about with the watchability, we talk about like possible sequels, and like both of these movies kind of sort of set up both kind of could be sequels, them fleeing the castle and the freak's still alive. You
Yep.
have these, the inbreeding monsters and stuff like that that didn't completely all die. So it's one of those ones like, but yet these movies came out, in the 90s and they've never made, which is kind of, for being a full moon movie, which has like 47 evil bongs, 37 gingerbread house movies or gingerbread man movies. They've made like how many trancers and puppet masters and demonic toys and
Oh my
everything
God.
else that they've made so many sequels and sequels and sequels and sequels for two movies that they were like, nope, fuck it, we ain't making sequels of these.
And you're right, dude. Like, dude, 150% right. Like, I love Killjoy, and Killjoy I think was sequeled properly. But yeah, Evil Bong has like fucking like 10. Puppet Master, I've lost count, and they're really reaching now. Because now, like you and I met, Bill D. Russell at New Jersey HorrorCon, who starred in the most recent Puppet Master, but it's kind of that Puppet Master presents Dr. Death kind of thing. So now it's like, it's not even about Blade anymore. It's about the spin-off character, second cousin.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, dude. They can give me subspecies till I'm blue in the face. I'll fight for that series. Everybody knows that about me. But so hey, but still, that's 5 movies so far with them. 6 movies if you include Vampire Journals. So
yeah,
right. While I think Lurking Fear could struggle a little bit more in a sequel, because it's just got a weird uncertainty about the direction they even wanted to go. I feel like while a sequel can happen, because like you said, they didn't get all the lurkers, and especially with the lurkers kind of breeding with each other or doing whatever it is lurkers do, you're never necessarily out of lurkers. But at least Castle Freak, while it still lacked a little bit in the final product, has a slightly more story arc, in my opinion, to it, that I feel if they were going to do a sequel, I'd prefer that they focus on Castle Freak first. If they do sequels for both, I'll see them both. But I would prefer that they focused on Castle Freak first, personally. I think the juice is more worth the squeeze. I just think there's more substance to it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because like I said, the the story arc for for Lurking is so oddly spliced with other stuff where like you said, the Lurking, the castle freak is in this house, maybe maybe somebody goes into the house and or goes to the castle, or you have those people who still survived. It's like, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some stories that you could probably put into where maybe the castle freak brought somebody into the house and they had a kid, and now that kid's a half castle freak or something. I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely one that it could definitely get probably a little bit better if you were gonna do sequels. I honestly don't think that they neither one of them need a sequel, which is probably why they never made it. But like you were saying, there's so many sequels to other movies that were full moon movies that you're kind of like, okay. And like you were saying before, with them, the puppet masters now not even dealing with the puppet masters. It reminded me, of we were talking about, with Ashley Lawrence being in this movie and being from the Hellraiser series. There are so many of those later Hellraiser movies that Pinhead is an afterthought. So it was kind of like one of those ones where, like, you're kind of dry, digging the well dry, a little too much, and that's what you jump in the shark, you already jumped it or whatever. But yeah, so it's one of those ones, like, in my opinion, it's just so weird that some of these full moon movies have had sequels and some don't, and not, like I said, not necessarily meaning that these ones shouldn't have sequels, but then some of the other ones that have had sequels probably shouldn't have had sequels either. So
Right. Like,
so that's why that was my only weird questioning of why these don't have them. Like I said, it's not that these ones deserve them, but because they don't really don't deserve a sequel, but some other series don't deserve too many of them either. So
no, totally. And like I said before, like, we'll save the deep diving for future episodes that I know will involve these movies. But like, subspecies, take my money. I don't care how many you make, because there's a proper story arc. I do feel that way about Killjoy. Take my money. I feel there's a proper story arc. When it comes to stuff like the Evil Bong, it's about a possessed fucking, like, universal alien bong. And especially like we said with Puppet Master, like, how much blood do you need to squeeze from that stone? You could have stopped the Evil Bong at 6, maybe even 5 or 4. You could have stopped the Puppet Master, which is up to, I think, like something near like 13 movies now.
yeah.
You could have stopped that around like 8 at the bare minimum. And there's like, what is that? Like 8 now movies that you didn't make that have finances that could have potentially followed up Castle Freak and Lurking Fear, maybe even made a better product. But we'll save all that deep diving for future talks about this stuff, because we want to keep it on point and about Castle Freak and Lurking Fear. So, my beloved Devil, your movie, you start off these obituaries.
So yeah, like I said, this movie is, I believe on a lower scale of the full moon movies. I didn't, like I said, when I decided to pick this one, it was more of trying to stay contractual towards what Vampire picked and Castle Freak. So, I kind of wanted it to be us to be kind of like somewhat similar stories. But then again, like I said, it's one of those ones that, like, I haven't watched it for a long time. It's still fun to watch. I mean, it's definitely got a rewatchability to it to an extent.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones that, yeah, you could watch maybe every so often if you're in for a good laugh or in to see a fun cheesy movie, or you're just into seeing, Ashley Lawrence in one of her early starring roles, or you're a huge fan of Jeffrey Combs and you hadn't seen this yet. So it's like, oh, he did this movie. Wow, he did a couple full moon movies all around the same time period. Oh, I'll check them out. So I mean, like, for that part of the aspect, yeah, it's fun. Like I said, it's just, yeah, the monsters were cool. There were some cool kills. There was some cool blood. But like overall, yeah, this movie wasn't winning any awards. Not that Castle Freak was gonna win any awards, but I feel like, overall Castle Freak was definitely a better story, a better finished product, I
Yeah.
would say, as far as movies. So yeah, I definitely got to do this one lower. So yeah, and that's giving it, this is giving it, probably a better score than I probably should have. But like you said, we add points for extra stuff. It is a movie that it's got Jeffrey Combs again. Like I said, it's definitely, it's brought in that Ashley Lawrence character that, maybe if this movie wouldn't have gotten done, maybe she wouldn't have been in Hellraiser. I mean, I'm not saying that she got Hellraiser because of this movie, but it was on the scales of her starting her acting career and stuff like that. So it
And
definitely could have.
when you have horror on your resume, regardless of where it's at, they're probably
Yeah.
at least gonna a casting director is probably at least gonna hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give it that point, but to me, I think a 6 is probably the best that I can give Lurking Fear.
I'm with you, bro. No, totally. Like, I think, the Fangs aren't stupid. I think they knew where we were going when it came to this. They probably figured it out pretty quick that of which movie was going to be victorious when it came to this. But at the same time, again, I have a soft spot for Full Moon. We both do. I love Full Moon movies. They're just so fun. And I enjoy them in general. Again, yeah, there is a rewatchability, but in my opinion, it's not going to probably go more than like twice a year. Like if I watch the movie in February, I'm probably not going to revisit it till at least September, kind of a thing. So like, it really just kind of depends on that. Versus Castle Freak, I could see myself splicing that in 3, maybe 4 times a year, depending on what I'm in the mood for, how much my bloodlust is, and stuff like that, and whether or not I want to watch a lady knock down 1 or 2 boob sizes, courtesy of Castle Freak. So it all kind of depends on what mood I'm in and stuff like that. But I'm with you, man. I don't think it's worth going through the ringer. I don't think it's worth just beating the movie within an inch of its life. It has its own issues, but it's an enjoyable time. It's 100% a Full Moon movie. Nobody's definitely going to deny that. And again, we love Ashley Lawrence. We love Jeffrey Combs. And we love creepy, kooky monsters. It's just the way it is. So just like you matched me, dude, I'm 100% going to match you. We'll rock it out as a 6. And while it's not quite flawless victory, it's definitely a solid victory for the vampire today as Castle Freak takes out Lurking Fear in our Full Moon Showdown, Vampire versus Devil. We are giving victory to Castle Freak. Horns up and fangs out, our beloved fiends and ghouls.
All right, Fangs, I got a brand new coffin nails for you. We're going to keep it super duper current because I just found out about this one. It's called the After Hours. If you like pro wrestling and if you like punk rock, then this one's going to be for you. It's got Gangrel in there from WWF, David Heath. It's also got like Paul London. It's even got Lars Fredrickson from Rancid, and I love Rancid, so it was very cool seeing him involved with this project. He's basically the narrator, so he's not like a super major player, but he's totally involved. He plays some guitar, and again, look, all things Rancid, it's all good. This is basically a Romeo and Juliet style movie. You've got, Beth and Jack. Beth from like the old school type vampires, who's known as the Vanished. You've got Jack, who's from like the new like punk rock, Lobos characters with like the new school vampires. And, the families don't approve. And by the end of the movie, you've got Vigo, which is Gangrel's character, and Dax battling it out basically over Beth's fate. And it definitely has bloodshed. It's definitely got some fun. And it's definitely got all that traditional kind of vampire lore, which I'm very big on, like you guys know, but a little bit of like new school flair. Look, the movie's not going to win any awards. As far as an entertainment value, it's actually quite high. I thought the movie was very well done. But overall, as a score, it's going to get a 6.5. It's a low budget movie, but again, it's fun. Give it a chance. Check it out. It's actually pretty short. It's only about an hour and 10 minutes, so you can kind of fit it in anyway. But anyway, it was a good time. It's a Tom Devlin movie. Again, it's called The After Hours, and it's brand new, 2024. Go check it out, Fangs.
What's up? It's the devil here with another quick movie review. Just got done watching the 2024 Nicolas Cage movie Arcadian. Have you seen it yet? It's pretty cool. They got little creepy, scary monsters trying to kill you. Very apocalyptic and horror. Kind of reminded me a little bit of The Quiet Place. Sort of. Yeah, did you check it out yet? You should, because if you don't, they might come and get you. It is now time to honor 3 in the month of August. We honor these 3 who have passed away. Carolyn Jones, a.k.a. Morticia Adams. Clu Gallagher from the Return of the Living Dead series. And also one of the greatest who have ever portrayed Dracula, Bela Lugosi. We would also like to put in a bonus honoree this month with John Hughes, for without him, the 80s would have sucked even more than they did. We honor these 4, lost but never forgotten.